Hello, my name is Akuila Yabaki, and I'm standing in this year's election under the Unity Fiji banner. As the writ of the election has been laid down, I think it's about time to fully introduce myself. To do so, I'd like to talk a bit about my history with Fiji politics, and then what I might see as my contribution to political leadership in Fiji. Like many of my age, in 1987, I only had a passing interest in politics, and politicians did not play a significant role in my life. That year, I just entered USP as a foundation science student. But things were to change very quickly and significantly, as my father, as part of the executive of the Methodist Church in Fiji and Rutuma, under the leadership of Reverend Chosatiki Kuroi, were ousted out of their office by church ministers that sympathized with Rambuka's coup. My father and other church ministers who were against the coup were immediately put on the street looking for alternative work and housing. From that point, I began to have an interest and perspective on Fiji politics. And I watched my father from the sidelines continue to be politically active as he sought to find a space for a harmonious, productive, and multiracial Fiji. A vision that for me, even at that time, made total sense, given the reality that we lived in. So as I went on to start work at ITC, the Government Computer Center, after graduating from USP, I took that perspective of Fiji into my work. Ensuring as I saw Fiji as a multiracial country, I moved into management and I began to employ young graduates. I made sure they reflected and I awarded careers opportunities and made sure they reflected the Fiji that I understood. In the meantime, my father had moved on with his politics back to May 14th and on to the Citizens Constitutional Forum, a renegade not only to the church hierarchy, but also to his own people. So this was our family life. A renegade father, dad, my polite, gentle, loving mother, trying to raise 4 children in this chaos. I remember in those times reading drafts of the Constitution, as my father would pass me things to read, to raise my awareness to the issues at stake, as well as his letters, the papers, and sermons he preached that spoke of the loving God of all people, the loving God that we believed in. In 2000, as George Speight undertook his civilian coup, I was outraged as I sensed the fear in my Indo-Fijian workmates as my people rioted in Suva. At the Parliament complex, while Fiji military, traditional and church leaders played games with our democracy. I tried my best to offer my comfort to my friends as the madness ran outside for months. Some of our Tokay workmates, ignorant and insensitive, sometimes relishing in the madness, not understanding what was happening with our Indo-Fijian workmates. In 2001, my sister married an Indo-Fijian gentleman who added to the richness of my life as Fijian, as well to my understanding of Fiji politics. We shared the same belief in God, but had walked different paths. And thankfully, vocal as he was, I was able to gain a deeper understanding of the Indo-Fijian perspective of life and the politics and its upheavals. But his greatest contribution to this political sharing was the birth to my sister of 2 nieces and a nephew. As I became better at my profession, I was sought after by various organizations to move over to help them with their growing IT investment. I turned down a few offers, but was then approached by DATEC to go over and lead the Pacific team looking after the Westpac Bank Pacific Island nations outsourcing of the IT to IBM. It was a global outsourcing project. Though I was enjoying my time at the Government Computer Center, the challenge of being at the forefront of such a challenge for Fiji attracted me. The other attraction with me was that I knew that DATEC was a predominantly Indo-Fijian business, staff business. And I had only worked in a Tokay-led government where I was thought of as a promising young Tokay IT leader. I wanted to work in an Indo-Fijian-led and predominantly Indo-Fijian organization. Not only to see how it would fare, but also to learn about my fellow citizenry. At work, at least, maybe at home. It was a path that was seen as madness by many friends of mine at the time, but the challenge on those two fronts took me across. In DATEC, I became involved in large software system projects. In response to a government financial management information system tender, I worked with a partner to propose a very cost-efficient upgrade of the present system. The race ended up with Balu Khan and his SAP-led proposal, and us running to the finish line. The SAP solution was so oversized, not only in cost, but in sophistication for Fiji, that it just did not make sense to me. I remember working with the permanent secretary at that time, Savinathan Narumbe, who has now asked me to join his party as a candidate, and his team trying to make a case to the politicians that SAP was an overkill and that what we needed was a simple upgrade of the current system. It came down that the only way that the cabinet would accept our proposal was if DATEC, the Akuila business, pulled out as partner. So we lost the deal, but Fiji won as we saved Fiji taxpayers millions of dollars and sent Balu Khan home without the deal that he had come to Fiji for. Then the Bai and Qayyum regime. We were awarded a $2 million contract to redevelop the immigration system. We received a letter from the Major Tender Board. And for a week or two, we celebrated. And we looked at our budgets, and it was happy times. But 2 or 3 weeks later, I was called to a meeting at the Ministry of Finance. I'd been told that at the meeting I was told that a Sri Lankan company had questioned our board and wanted it reviewed, reasons of collusion. We went knocking at every door to try and restore our position, but it was to no avail. The Sri Lankans had arrived and they were going to play a major part in the politics of Fiji until today. I remember at the time we were knocking at the National Security Advisor, who advises the PM every morning on his door, to try not only to retrieve our position, but also to warn them of what I could see happening. That is, of Qayyum setting up his network throughout the country's governance structure. This was back in, I think, 2007, maybe. Building his network throughout the country's governance structure, using the business houses, media, and expat resources. But I was young. I was just a lad in his mid-30s, talking up to generals that said they knew their business of security. I was told, after being asked to document my concerns, which I did, that the report from the PM's desk was that I should not worry and that the generals were in control. I knew then they were in over their heads, and today we live in that reality. I went back to my desk, and that day I declared war on the regime, soon to become the Fiji First Government. I showed my disdain. I was not apologetic to my feelings towards the regime, well documented in my social media space until today. My politics was going to define my life more than my profession. I remember sitting down and praying to the Lord and saying, Lord, I'm going to war. I need you to look after my family, to my young family. Until today, he has. I may not be in continued employment. I get consultancy jobs now and then. But my sons are doing well at school. Although, like every parent, they can do better. But we live on 6 acres of property, a house, and my wife has a serious career in international development banking. And I just moved to an open-ended contract. And my retired father is happily retired and has the means to enjoy his retirement. In 2015, I was asked to resign from Daytech with the CEO, as Daytech was taken over by Vodafone. I was surprised, but then again I wasn't, as I knew even my skills would not be tenable in a Vodafone company that treasured more its relationship with the regime and then the Fiji First government. As if it was planned, my mortgage was paid just in time to leave their employment. Fortunately, I had a family business and I could fall back on, and with occasional IT consultancy work, I was able to keep up my political activism. So these are the experiences that have formed me, that have informed me and my politics. Experiences that I do not wish on anyone else, especially my and your children. So when our party leader, Savananatha Rumbe, approached me earlier this year to ask me to join him in the fight for the cause, I said, Tau, I have no money. But he said, don't worry about that, just come along and we'll sort that out as we go along. As to my contributions, if the people believe Unity Fiji worthy, and I am suitably ranked in our party to get in, my first are those informed by my life lessons. Life lessons centered on my unequivocal faith in the God that my father passed me, that have driven me to the madness that my poor wife and sons have lived with me through. Because for me, it has been a war. It has yet to end, but I aim to end it so that my children will have a better Fiji to live in. One that I enjoyed earlier in my life until that madness came upon us. Second is my profession. I always believe that Fiji has the capacity to export professionals, to have an industry of exporting professional services. Why? Because I have lived it. At Daytech, we took local talent and we provided IT services, IT professional services to overseas businesses, even to the towering standards of IBM. I have witnessed under this regime and government, what I have witnessed under this regime and government is that we have gone backwards. When once we were up there with the rest of the world, cutting code on state-of-the-art technology platforms and entering the internet age, just as the world got on, we no longer do those things. We can't even do what we used to do way back in the 80s, which was run a government email system. As I began to see after the 2006 coup, government officials' business cards start to pop up with Gmail accounts, which showed that they were unable to service the existing system. Hopefully in my political life I will be able to put my time back into my profession and see the appearance of the technology leadership that we once had in our economic development. Not the stupidity that we see in the multiple bank ATMs and FPOS machines sitting side by side in public spaces and shops. And further build and export professional services in other fields like medicine and engineering. And even in sports with the rugby, get that more organized in terms of selling rugby players. There's so many leagues around the world that are looking for talent. the same method, same process. Not the poor man's IT of telemarketers and fruit pickers that previous governments, including this one, only has the vision for. Our country has always been a beautiful country. Its flora and fauna, land and seas have always been a wonder to me. Why can't our people live up to that beauty? They are not bad people. Our rugby heroes show that on the rugby field when they play, and especially when they sing after their games for the world to see. They wear their hearts on their sleeves. It is because our leaders have misled us. Last week, my father told me that Mr. Rambuka was no longer allowed to preach at church. And I was overjoyed. There was so many years I've seen him at the pulpit of our church preaching, and I always thought of the justice of it, the injustice of it, of what he had done, and for us to honor him in that position. But later I came to find out it was just because it was a political season and the church had decided that all people participating in politics would step down. But I hope that my church one day will understand and be sensitive to the perception of certain things that happen within the church to other communities, and make a stand and be brave enough to do things like that. I believe we are a principled people. We just need to start showing it in our politics. That those that are standing for election and seek to represent us know this. We just need to be braver. Because if we are, we will win a greater prize for our children and our future generations. God bless Fiji.